作れなかった。
He read something you said about, in spite of the fact that this was your 8th album, you could never put together an album like this before. What exactly were you referring to? What was standing in the way of
making an album? I've never, it never occurred to me to bring a live performance into the studio, and that you could even do that. And there was my understanding, the process of making a record was you put the tracks down with a band, then you spend a little time overdubbing on those, and then you when all of that was done, you come in and sing your vocals, and that's how I approached record making. And it never occurred to me, as I say, to do it this way until John Shalhoub said, "Hey, let's make a record and let's do it this way."
You read to tons. It sounds like a very long question. That's not right. It seems like now you've achieved. You're starting to pick up momentum in the your concerts here are doing incredibly well, getting a lot of people. The album sounds great. Do you think it's a matter of you're having gone through a lot and kind of arrived at a suitable style, or basically your style having been the same all along? It's just been you and your music. The time is starting to catch up with you. What do you think is the case of?
I think it's mainly just having the good fortune to finally be in contact with a group of people who are sympathetic, from John Shalhoub, the producer, the guys that played on this record, the guys I have out as a touring band, the people I work with professionally on the business end of things, and it's just I haven't done much other than persevered, and that's just a case of blind faith. I mean, I don't know how to do anything else but what I do. So I would say it's just my good fortune that finally, I seem to be, as I say, in with a bunch of good folks.
You originally put out, I guess, a record or two at Epic.
Mm-hmm.
You kind of went under and for several years just sort of roamed around on the club scene. Did you figure at the time that, were you determined to one day come back and make it bigger? Were you just thinking, well, life on the road is tough, but this is what I want to do, and I'm happy with it?
I mean, I don't know that I've ever looked at it as, I'm going to make it big, have hits, so on and so forth, so much as it's always sort of been just kind of a learning process for me. When I was in Nashville, I made those 2 records for Epic. I spent 5 years there really learning how to be a songwriter, and I look at that as my apprenticeship in that field of songwriting. And then after that, it was just it was time to leave Nashville. The 2 Epic records, which were kind of almost a fluke, they didn't do anything, so that was fine with me, and I just moved on and started traveling and learning how to be a performer. And I look at those years as sort of my apprenticeship in performing. It's kind of I'm a slow learner, basically, and I guess it's taken all this time for it to start to maybe come together a little bit.
It's almost kind of like a journey then. Sort of.
Yeah, fair enough.
Coming to the end of that now?
No, it's a never-ending deal,
Yeah.
I would think. But
during this long journey of yours, did you ever become so discouraged that you thought about shelving and all?
Absolutely.
Is that right?
Yeah, many times.
Like, when can you recall it being saved?
Well, my temperament in the old days was such that after an album would come out and not sell very well, I would be thrown into the depths of despair and depression, exacerbated by my alcohol and drug abuse for many years. It didn't help it any. Since I've been sober, which has been a little more than 3.5 years, my life has changed a great deal in all respects. That's one respect. I don't need that kind of acceptance and recognition from that I seemed to need before I got sober. My work doesn't define me like it used to.
What fuels you now?
Well, it's certainly a part of that. I love what I do, but it has a much more. My priorities have changed. I have a family, wife, kids. You know, the little glimpses of joy that I get come from all kinds of different places now, not just from my own, you know, what music and so on and so forth. I get them. My life is much more well-rounded, I think, than it was. I was very limited, as any practicing addict is. It's the nature of addiction. Your world gets smaller and smaller and smaller. And my world is doing just the opposite these days. And music is it's a big part of my world, and I love it very much, but it's not, it's a privilege now and music is a gift.
Well, I think it's your fourth record company now, fourth label, I guess, was Epic, MCA, Geffen, and now A&M.
I'm hard on record companies.
Is that right? In what way? Well, do you find yourself at odds with them, or has it been a different case every time?
It's been different, yeah. The situation with MCA, the situation with Epic was two records that didn't do anything, and them saying very politely, well, we'll see you later. And that's basically been it with all of them. It's simply been a question of commercial performance. And it is commercial art after all, and, fair enough. MCA, we asked to get out of that contract because we didn't feel like they were doing much. The Geffen situation was 3 records, and they did the best they could to try and sell them. I firmly believe that, and I certainly did the best I could do to make good music, and it just didn't happen. When one door closes, another one opens. As it turns out, if Geffen hadn't let me go, although I had to endure a little period of not knowing if I was even going to make another record, having to really sit down and reconsider my career, it also afforded me eventually. Demon Records came forth, put up the money, and we got this record made. A&M picked it up. None of that would have happened had Geffen not released me, not said, we're not going to make another record with you.
Pretty amazing staying power, though, because all 4 labels are pretty large.
Yeah.
You figure that the larger labels would, if the first one drops you like a hot potato, the other ones are going to kind of shy away, and you're going to find yourself recording on our Hooli Records or something like that. But in your case, it's been 4 major labels.
Indeed, yeah.
Do you think it's a matter of people in the industry personally cottoning to your music and saying, this guy is great, we can really do something with this guy?
I don't know. I mean, I think in A&M's case, we gave them a record that they really liked, and I think I was, again, back to being fortunate enough to get involved with some really great people. And we made a record that, as it turned out, 3 or 4 major labels wanted. And A&M was wanted it most. So, and I feel now like I've found a kind of a home with them. They've been really nice and really supportive. And I'm glad to, be associated with them.
Don't worry, he'll leave soon, then you can tell us what you really think. I was rather impressed by some of the members on the record, Nick Lowe and Jim Keltner and Brad Cooter. You had them in mind before even thinking about putting together the record, or did you just happen to cross paths somewhere along the process?
Well, I've known them all for about 7, 8 years, and I've worked with them on various other projects. But it was John Shalhoub, the producer's idea to make the record this way, with those musicians specifically, and the way we made the record in a short period of time, going for a live performance. It was all John's idea. And as I say, I was in between record deals, and all I had was an offer from Demon Records in Great Britain to make some kind of an album that they would in turn release in the UK, and that I would be free to do with whatever, make whatever deals I could everywhere else. So I knew I had that, but I didn't even know what kind of record I wanted to make. I was baffled. I'd made 7 records, and it was a real period of sort of really looking at it, and in fact I didn't even I even considered not making another record because as I say, I didn't know what I wanted to do. So it was simply being at a point where being at the right place at the right time. When I ran into John Shalhoub and being receptive to it. I mean, it's not like he had a track record as a producer. He hadn't done any production to speak of, but
What is his background, Rick?
Well, he books the performers for a little club called McCabe's in Santa Monica, and that's how I knew him. I had played McCabe's pretty regularly, and he booked me there. But he was so firm in his conviction, and it sounded right to me. So I said, okay.
Man with a vision.
Yeah, he definitely was that. And it's to his credit that the original idea maintained its integrity throughout the process of making the record, which is very unusual. There wasn't much compromise in terms of the original vision. In all its naivety, he managed to pull it off.
Was that the first time you recorded with those guys we just mentioned there?
As a group, it was. I've worked with Nick Lowe. He produced half of an album I made for Geffen, and he was part of the rhythm section. I've played with him in that capacity. I've worked with Ry on several of his records. I've been a part of his touring band 3 different times, and I've worked with him on some soundtracks for films. And Jim Keltner, I've worked with him in conjunction with Ry.
So working with them for this record, did you encounter anything new about them that you hadn't discovered before?
Well, I'd never played with them in this context of just bare bones, no rehearsal, let it rip kind of stuff. And I think we all kind of surprised each other with the kind of racket we wound up making.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Things really clicking there.
Yeah, very much. I think we surprised ourselves. Yeah.
I was rather amazed at the short amount of time it took you to put the record together. I guess that's attributable in part to what you were talking about there, the sort of the chemistry. I guess you yourself were in sort of an altered state of mind, altered state of consciousness at the time, huh?
You mean by virtue
Of the music or the whole experience?
Absolutely, yeah. It was a real high. It was very intense, emotional, musical experience. And again, it was credit to John Shalhoub. I mean, he wanted us to do it in 3 days. I had to beg him for the 4th day. Give you some idea of where he was at. Yeah, what he was trying to get rid of was the thought process. I think he reckoned that was an enemy rather than an ally. And I think we all went along with him, even though this was a very foreign approach for us too, because I think we all, in our hearts, had always felt like we were at our best when we didn't quite know what the hell we were doing, you know. There's a point at which a musician has learned too much, and he starts playing with his head, you know. And I think we kind of got around that somehow.
Yeah, well, I guess if you're in the studio for the 2nd month running and you're arguing with the producer about, well, that background vocal's got to go, this one's going to stay in, it gets pretty silly.
It starts to become a different kind of process.
Politics of this.
Yeah, and just, yeah.
I imagine you're going to stick with this process then. In the future.
I think for me this is a good way to do it. Now, you know, the next we could go in and it could all fall flat on its face. I mean, it's a bit of a roll of the dice, but I think that's what keeps things, you know, exciting, fresh. So I think we would start from this point, and if it doesn't work, punt. You know, come up with something else.
You first met Ry Cooder about when? You said that was 7 or 8 years ago?
1980.
1980.
Actually, 79.
Was that on a job?
We were put in touch by a mutual friend, and he was making an album, The Borderline, and he needed songs, and I was introduced as a possible source of material for him, and wound up writing a song for him, The Way We Make a Broken Heart, and working on the record, playing guitar, and we just kind of hit it off, and next thing I knew, he had hired my whole band to go out on the road with him. We went to Europe, did a tour, and then toured in, it was autumn of 1980, and we toured in the States in winter of 81. And then I worked with him on and off for the next 4 years, you know, touring or studio work.
Quite accounted for your hitting it off with Ry so well.
I think probably. I think we mainly just shared an enthusiasm for the same kinds of music. Although he was much more informed about it than I was.
Professor of American roots music.
Just he had spent more time, you know, going back. But I was very receptive to all the knowledge he had to offer in that regard. And that's mainly it. And I just personally we like each other.
One similarity he sees between you and Ry Cooder is that, you know, obviously Ry Cooder is a musician who's able to put together music 100% the way he wants to do it, and he's not influenced at all by fashion or fad or even by a management or record company, because, you know, what people expect of him is that he be Ry Cooder, and he kind of sees the same thing in you as well. You know, people wouldn't have any expectations of you, like to become the next pop idol or anything like that. just a matter of you being left to your own devices, coming up with your own original music. That's a pretty accurate evaluation.
I would say, yeah, we're I do what I do, and I think that's, as he pointed out, that's, people don't expect anything else.
A lot of people
Which is
say,
good.
A lot of artists say that, though. Even the most, people who are at the top of the charts are very clearly fashionable. Will always say that. It's kind of like the stock answer. But in your case, that really seems to be the fact.
Well, I think the fact is with all those us different music makers, proponents of music, I don't think there's any such thing as selling out. I think you do what you do. The guys that make those records that go to the top of the charts know how to do that stuff. I don't, and Rye doesn't either. Which is not to say that our music's any better or worse. It's just, we know how to do what we know how to do. I think other people have other motives. Maybe there's all kinds of different motives for making different kinds of music. I think my main drive has been songwriting since I first picked up the guitar, and I maintain that I would be writing songs whether they had a commercial outlet or not. It's so much a part of me, and I think Rye with his playing is very similar. He just plays. He plays the guitar.
Yeah. Just out of curiosity, what's the size of your repertoire? Your own.
The songs that I've written.
Yeah.
Gosh, I don't know.
So right.
700 songs.
Really?
Between 500 and 1,000 somewhere. I don't know.
It's amazing. You toured with the band a little bit, didn't you?
ライブというかね。
The band on this record.
No, we did one show.
I did one show.
In Los Angeles.
That was the one in.
That's right. In fact, it was for A&M Records' 25th anniversary. It wasn't even a show for just the general public.
It's like a private party or something.
Yeah, exactly.
You were kind of the house band that night.
Well, we were one of half a dozen other A&M acts over the course of a week played shows. But there was talk of trying to get out and doing a tour with this band in September in America, and there's no plans beyond that. But I would tend to think that that once we got out, that we'd have so much fun that we'd want to come take it around the world, if possible, to Europe and maybe to Japan.
Of course, Jim Keltner and Nick Lowe have been seeing a lot of each other in
That's fine.
Yeah. It's kind of a strange way of categorizing you here in Japan. They are trying to kind of sell you as an American version of Elvis Costello.
They are now?
Yeah, well, there's that kind of an attitude.
Really?
Yeah. That's not the record company's doing, by the way.
Yeah.
It's more the mass media. For those who are involved in the musical press, that is. Kind of a strange hypothetical question, but do you think if you had been born and raised in the UK, as Elvis was, do you think you would have gained better acceptance there?
There?
Yeah.
Than I have already, you mean?
Yeah.
In the UK?
Well, in the sense that he's already been very successful. Because he was born and raised there, and he also started out there.
Yeah.
For some reason, a person like him, I guess he does share certain attributes in common with you. He's mainly a songwriter, a very good performer too, and is rather unique. Kind of stands out, among the pop successes. It's very different, and that's, I guess, why you remind people of Elvis Costello. So, I mean, do you think your style of performance, your style of songwriting, analyze that? What's going on?
I've just been grateful, that I've had a career in Europe and actually been in a position of being able to go over and tour with a band and make a little money for the last 4 or 5 years, as opposed to in the States it's always been a lose money proposition. Up until this record, which changed it, we were able to go out in the States and fill up, pretty fair sized clubs, up to like 1,200 seat clubs. Whereas before in the States, I'd gone out and played 50 people in this place and a couple hundred here, and maybe 500 here. But then there's always been the gigs where you've gotten 20 and 30 people, and this record has changed that. So I'm glad. It's kind of catching up. So I'm in a situation now where I can work 5-6 months out of the year between the States, going to Europe, coming here, going to Australia. It's good.
He wanted to ask something I thought you'd already answered, because he doesn't understand a lot of what's being said here, and like I said, we cut out the interpreting in the interest of time.
Right.
So there's a little bit of overlap here. We've got about 4 minutes or so. There's a song, what your dad did, about how his interpretation of it is that you're saying that you don't want to become like you don't want to do things your dad did, but you end up doing them anyway, and that kind of hit home with him. Is that autobiographical or?
Yeah, I think so. I think it comes from my experience as a parent, and that phenomenon that I think all males have of as we get older, our dads somehow become smarter. Yeah, because faced with the same things, we find that they made some pretty good choices, or at least we may make some of the same. And ultimately, my feeling is that my dad did love us. It's just no more or less than I love my own kids. Regardless of my harsh judgments on some of his calls concerning raising me, I believe that he, and now that I'm a parent and I see how difficult it is to be a parent,
in retrospect, he made some pretty good choices.
Exactly.
Yeah. Oh, you did a little thing with Smoke on the Water there, stage there. You were referring to having seen somebody
ちょっと
play.
その話ももうちょっと長く聞かせてくれれば、びっくりした、なぜびっくりしたかって。
What exactly was that referring to?
Well, it was referring to when I lived in Los Angeles, I lived in the Topanga Canyon, and I didn't tell them the whole story because I knew they wouldn't get it. But this guy played electric piano, Wurlitzer electric piano, through a stack of Marshall amplifiers, and he had a friend who was a drummer, and the friend used to come up, and they would jam all day, every day, and that's the only song they knew. And that riff, and then I played my song of mine, I Don't Even Try, which has a very similar riff, and I was trying to show them where I got the idea from.
Oh, I see.
Where I stole the riff from. Like, is it any wonder? You'd write one too if you had to hear Smoke on the Water.
Coming into your house right for us. ロサンゼルスの郊外に住んでた時からです to was something you would find in Japan here, and that when all kids start up for your authority, the first song they play is Smoke on the Water.
Really?
Which is probably the same mistake as well. He thought you'd seen that here or something. You thought you'd seen maybe some kids in a guitar shop trying to play that or something.
だから他にも日本に来てびっくりしたことありましたかって聞こうと思ったんですよ。
So the original question were you surprised by anything else you've seen in Japan of a similar nature? Any other quaint sights you've maybe seen here? But I guess it kind of misses the mark. That was the point of the
時間がないんで。
Actually, I do. I'll tell you. I will say something about that. I was moved by these businessmen in their three-piece suits in the batting cages after work, hitting the balls like they were 8 years old, and that just it got me in the heart that they still have their boys are alive and well, and it just it was very touching.
それに関連したThe song Feels Like Rain seems to reflect the feeling of sadness and also a certain joy at the same time. A general question in regards to your approach to songwriting and the themes you try to deal with. He thinks this is rather representative in that you don't seem to deal with dramatic stories as much as this kind of I don't know what you would say, more about well, what inspires you to come up with a song? Is it this kind of a typical setting?
Gosh, I mean, anything can set me off, from a newspaper headline to something somebody says. Feels Like Rain was just to give you an example, and they're all different. I can spend a week on a song sometimes, but Feels Like Rain, when I wrote it in 20 minutes, that'll happen sometimes. And I was just sitting, it was a Sunday morning, I was sitting next to my wife in the living room, we were reading the Sunday paper, and I was in my damn pajamas, and I'm just strumming along, and it's like it hits you. And when they come like that, you're just going, okay, wait a minute, and you're just taking it down, I'm not even writing it. I mean, it's just wherever they come from, it's like you're just receiving it.
Huh. But the fact that it would happen in a quiet living room on a Sunday afternoon, I guess, shows that maybe he's right and that you seem to be more inspired by, the mundane.
I guess, yeah.
As opposed to maybe dramatic events.
Yeah. Well, I think, I've always maintained that I write fiction, but I think fiction is supposed to reflect real life, and it's out of that mundane day-to-day stuff that those little glimpses of something shimmering come from,
Okay. どうもありがとうございます。Alright, I guess I'll do it then.
Yeah?
I think we might get a couple of pics here. I'm not sure.
Sure.